From understanding your communications and other tapes, we all co-create, both victim and perpetrator, as I understand. Is that correct?
It's always a vibrational match. It cannot be otherwise.
Twice in the last 8 months, have been at the effects of vandals and thieves in my home, in my driveway, in fact. And it's cost me numerous thousands of dollars, plus just the violation of it has been uncomfortable. What I would like to know is, how do I get a sense of what my vibrational participation is in that, knowingly? I'm about to go on some international travel, and I don't want to take this with me. And also, does the structure that I live in have something to do with the attraction of this as well, from a feng shui perspective?
Well, there are those who want to give the credit to anything outside of themselves. In other words, when something's happening that you are not pleased with, it sometimes feels comforting to give the credit to someone else.
The reason that I asked that, I found out that after this latest incident, that the people who lived in this house before me apparently had numerous intrusions and difficulties with this as well.
When did you find that out?
I was initially made aware of it right after I moved into it a couple of years ago, but then after this last incident, I found out from another neighbor that apparently it had been an ongoing thing.
Well, it's always easier to understand the second one than it is the first one, because once something happens and you give your attention to it, it becomes a more active part of your own vibration. And once it's an active part of your own vibration, then you have to do something to find some way of deactivating it. And the way you deactivate the feeling of vulnerability is by really activating the feeling of well-being. And we know it is not the easiest thing to do, because your rational mind keeps turning to. You offered a word to us that we think is a key word when you talked about the violation of it. And in fact, even though we know it is an inconvenience, and even though we know that it hasn't been pleasant to spend the money to replace and repair, we can feel that the strongest vibration that is within you, that has the strongest pulling power, is that vibration that is around that feeling of violation. Is sort of that feeling of inappropriateness, that someone disrespects you or your property. That's the most dominant vibration that if we were standing in your shoes, we would want to soothe a little bit. But we want to address your other questions first, and then we'll talk about how to go about that. There is some discussion about the energy of a space, but the energy vortex is really you. And so we would not spend too much time trying to change the energy of a space. We would work on our own connection to source energy. Then you are a vortex that floods any space. We would not spend any time trying to figure out why it's happening, in the same way that we said earlier that we don't encourage, or that Magellan doesn't say, "Where have you been?" We would not try to figure out who's doing it, or why they're doing it, or why they're doing it to you. It is enough for you to say, okay, this has been happening and I don't like it. What I would prefer is something else. But once something has gone this far, that feels a little bit too simplistic to, in other words, it's hard for you to shift your energy that dramatically, because these manifestations have been happening that you think about. Which feels worse to you? The part you played in it happening, or the part they played in it happening? Or do you think what you said in your opening words to us, that we are all co-creating? So you are saying, I'm playing some part in all of this, and I'm wanting to understand what part it is. That was your question to us.
That is absolutely the part. They do what they do, and I'm okay with that.
But why am I playing with them?
What I want to know is, how am I putting this vibration out to create the match?
Well, it's
and
interesting.
I'm not aware of it.
It happens in subtle ways like this. It's like making a decision that you're going to always give people value for their money, and working hard to make sure that you do that, but then watching others shortcut here and there. and feeling uneasy that they do. Feeling irritation that people are literally robbing. In other words, sometimes you see men on a crew that they take the money but they don't work, or they do the work but they don't do it well. And since you do your best to do it so well, that just irritates you. And you have this feeling that there's sort of this unethical thievery going on under the guise of honesty, and that bothers you, doesn't it?
Indeed.
And so as you hold that vibration little by little, sort of beating the drum of it without even realizing you're doing it, in time your feeling sort of erodes to that until you attract evidence of that vibration to yourself. And we think that that is how it got started. Does that seem logical to you?
It seems possible.
Now, we haven't said this here today, and this is a perfect place to insert this. We want to teach you the importance of feeling good more than we want to teach you how to keep those rascals out of your equipment. Because when you feel good, the rascals cannot get into your equipment. In other words, we want to teach someone how to feel good about a relationship more than we want to teach them how to get a relationship, because we know that behind everything that comes to you is the vibration that you've practiced. So as you think about what has happened and you feel the frustration of it, now, from that feeling of frustration, you could begin talking about how proud you are that you had the wherewithal to replace your tools, and how it really didn't set you back at all. And if it was anyone's intention to do you any real harm, they didn't accomplish it. And that no one really can keep you down because you're the creator of your own reality. And while you don't want the inconvenience of anything like that ever again, you're not worried about it because you have the ability to take care of it. Now, in that vibration, there's much less frustration and more of a feeling of pride, more of a feeling of empowerment, isn't there? And yes. As you beat that drum and that becomes your new vibrational set point, you will not be the one that they choose. But in addition, you have to sort of go back and clean up the vibration that sort of got it started to begin with. In other words, you begin to recognize when you're seeing someone that you think just because they're not performing in the way you think that they should or in the way that you would, you have to bring yourself to the place that you're not letting that eat away at you. In other words, you have to sort of relax and let people live what they're living without it bothering you. Well, not much has changed in your vibration since that incident, which means since you are on a sort of roll, it is probable that unless you do something to change your vibration, that it would happen again. Moving might be enough to make you expect differently, but give us some words. Just practice it. Make us believe that you want to believe that you are the experiencer of well-being. In other words, reach for some words and make them feel convincing to us. Because, you see, what you've been doing so far, and it's normal, almost everybody does, you're just sort of telling it like it is and explaining that you don't know what to do. Well, there's no power in that. So you want to stop telling it like it has been and start practicing the words that give you a greater sense of security.
It's nice to have new tools to work with. That feels good. And I've learned considerable...
I don't know what I did to attract this, but I do now understand that I was being given some emotional clues. And while I'm still not really absolutely sure every time I'm getting one of those emotional clues, I do know that negative emotion is always pointing it right at them. And because of these experiences, my sensitivity has been heightened, and I'm really on the watch. I've asked the universe to help me be aware of when I'm thinking thoughts or beating the drum. And certainly I understand that whenever I repeat the story, whenever I explain to someone that this is what has happened, I certainly activate that vibration within me more. And so any time that I tell the story and feel the subsequent negative emotion, then I know that I'm in essence headed back to Phoenix, so I'm going to try to avoid that. And there are so many aspects of my work and of my home and of my vehicles that are not negative in nature that I can focus upon. I do like knowing that I can lock up the tools, and I do like knowing that all of us in the neighborhood are a little more alert. And I do believe that I could move to a new area, but it is not necessary that I move. I could change my vibration. Now, so far, nothing that we've said has really struck you. And so if we were standing in your physical shoes, we'd keep going. But you see, what happens with most people? They get about that far. They don't feel any better. They sort of feel like, well, there's no point in going any further. And so they don't go any further. So then nothing else changes, and then it happens again. So now you're saying, well, this time I'm going to take the bull by the horns. Do I or do I not feel more secure now that I am securing my equipment and locking my vehicles? Do I feel more secure? Well, yes, actually, I do feel more secure. Would I feel more secure if I got more light out there? Well, yes, that might make me feel more secure. Would I feel more secure if I moved into an entirely different neighborhood? Yes, that might make me feel more secure. It also might make me feel more resentful. I might find myself explaining to the neighbors why I moved over here. In other words, I might worry that, as you just said, what if I go overseas? Clearly, I'm going to go to a neighborhood that's different from the neighborhood I live in, but you're worried about even going out of the country and attracting it. So we're not really big encouragers of changing the conditions in order to try to soothe yourself. We're more encouragers of changing the way you are approaching with thought in order to feel better.
Well, at this point, Abraham, does just my mere thinking about this incident have the same weight as perhaps relaying the story to someone? In other words, I recently went to Houston.
No, it is more powerful when you talk about it.
Okay.
Because when your words evoke response from others. And when you're talking about it, you're usually talking about it longer, and you're usually getting more descriptive about it. And so your thought about it, in other words, when you catch yourself in the thought, don't panic and don't worry about it. Just stop and say, well, that was then, this is now. I didn't know then what I know now. I'm working to shift my vibration, and all is really well. And what's the worst possible thing that could happen? I've survived this. There's really nothing to panic about. In other words, isn't it nice that my vibration doesn't attract traffic accidents that kill me or maim me? Or isn't it nice that I don't attract robbers or that are meaning harm to my physical body? In other words, this is a very benign sort of thing that was a vibrational match to my concern about the highway robbery that I see out there in the construction world. In other words, and I'm working to clean that vibration up and feeling better about people in general all the time. You see, We've been saying for a long time, and sometimes you like it and sometimes you don't, that if you've got negative emotion and you're not aware of it, so you don't do anything to find relief from it, then something that matches it will come. It will get bigger. So the negative emotion moves to a manifestation, or the negative emotion moves to a physical sensation, which then moves to an uncomfortable physical sensation that then could even move to a disease. In other words, it always gets bigger unless you do something to change it, you see. And so if we were standing in your physical shoes, we would say, isn't this nice that I have such a light and fluffy and unimportant reflection that is pointing out to me something that I didn't even know was going on? Because it's nice when something manifests and you can deal with it rather than having it bubbling around in your vibration, percolating beneath the surface. Wouldn't you rather get it out in the open where you can deal with it? That's sort of the person that you've been. That's what you say about so many things. You don't appreciate people who have underlying messages. You don't like people who pretend one thing and say another. You like straight talkers. You like people that are expressing what their true heart is, you see. And so the universe is just giving you that back. In other words, you're just getting what you always like. I want a pure reflection of what's going on. And you're getting it. And we think it is a wonderful thing. And we don't feel anything vulnerable about you. And even if somebody broke into your car and stole something again, we would still not call it vulnerable. We would call it irritant and frustrating.
It's a bit of a stretch to say light and fluffy, though.
Well, compared to what a lot of people are living, this is about as light and fluffy as it gets.
Okay.
Think about it. Think about it. No one's starving. No one got run over. No one died. No one's dying of a deadly disease. Your heart isn't being ripped out. In other words, pretty light and fluffy.
Okay, I can go there.
Good.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.